welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, it's your boy Sean.
And as always, it's your boy Jackson. He floats. We all float down here.
And listen, we're going to talk about It Chapter 2, because It Chapter 2 floats down here in that it sucks. It deserves to float. But before we do, I do need to make good on a promise and talk about something else that floats.
Yeah. Oh no, I set you up for it. I didn't even mean to. God damn it.
You did. That's right. I'm going to talk about Battleship for a minute. Because last week's episode, if you haven't listened to it, it's the Clue episode. Clue fucking rules. That episode fucking rules. Go listen to it.
Hard agree on both counts. I will not be contributing to this Battleship discussion because I refuse to watch it.
Well, as I say, this was all me, too. I basically said that, listen, we hadn't watched Battleship, and it felt like it was on at least one of us to sit down and actually watch this movie. So, like, because we were kind of dogging on it in a little bit, but, like, we're both like, yeah, neither one of us have seen it. Let's make sure it's actually as bad as we expect it to be. And I am here to report that it is pretty bad, which should come as no shock to literally anyone. And just your quick rundown. Your first half an hour kind of feels like it would be a like Clue-esque type of thing. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, kind of trying to be funny. It's never really funny, but it's trying to be. And then it turns into not that. And for full candidness, I was playing video games while I watched this movie because I had just sat through 3 hours of it and was sitting through 131 minutes of Battleship. And was just like, I can do two things at once. I'm not giving this movie my full attention. I don't care.
It has to earn it.
Yes.
Which it did not.
It did not. No, it absolutely did not. It basically, I ended up with feeling like I was never really bored. And I don't know whether that's because the movie was like flashing colors, weirdness. Like it was basically a Transformers movie. Or it was the fact that I was playing video games while I was watching it. So, you know what? Either way, it wasn't a great movie. My big takeaway was that it was a complete mess, nigh incomprehensible, barely understood what was happening, barely understood why things were happening, but also that whoever fucking designed the aliens absolutely went on to work for BioWare and designed the Anthem mechs, because they just look like Anthem suits. Just to a T. It's crazy how much they look like Anthem suits.
Are these the loving creatures that I dubbed Master Chap upon seeing them?
And they look like either Doom Guy or if you are familiar with any of the Anthem ads, you know the yellow Anthem that stands kind of in the middle? Yeah, they look like that, and they're also yellow. So they're just Anthem mechs, and I don't get how they got away with this. It was also funded pretty clearly, pretty extensively by the United States Navy, and was I don't have much more to say about that side of things other than yes. And also they clearly got a bunch of actual war veterans to play various parts in the movie. Like there is one gentleman who is a double amputee, and I guarantee this person was actually a Army soldier or Navy soldier or whatever branch of the military he was in. Definitely actually a double amputee. So, like, mad respect to this dude. Was not an actor. Could very clearly tell that. And then later on, we actually get a battleship, and that's the closest thing that we get to the game Battleship, other than the fact that the aliens fire little pegs as weapons. And it's a bunch of old dudes, all who were also clearly veterans because none of them could act either, and like clearly veterans who worked on a battleship. And like, cool, I guess, but like it. I'm hesitant to call this movie anything other than like fucking propaganda. A couple other fun things about Battleship. Liam Neeson is in it.
Oh,
if this
really?
movie was set, yes, Liam Neeson is the commander in it.
I feel like they didn't advertise that at all back in the day, because I know Rihanna's in it.
Rihanna's in it. The main character today would absolutely be played by Channing Tatum. It's just a Channing Tatum type. There's a tie-in to it in that one of the Skarsgårds plays the Channing Tatum type's older brother. And as a final little bit, Rami Malek is in this movie for all of about 30 seconds. There are so many people listed on this movie. If you control F it on IMDb, it will scroll for like 20 seconds before it gets to Rami Malek's name. It's insane.
But Sean, here's the real important question. Does Liam Neeson ever get into a bigger mech and turn to Rihanna and say, "What do you stand for, Rihanna? Decide here and now." Does that happen?
I don't think Rihanna and Liam Neeson are ever in the same scene together.
See, the trailers made it seem like she was the main character back in the day.
She's not.
Huh.
Oh, and the dude from Game Night. We watched Game Night for the podcast, I believe.
Yeah.
We've watched so many things. I just realized I don't even remember everything that we've watched. But the policeman is in the movie as well.
Oh.
But he looks way younger, and it is uncomfortable how much younger he looks.
I mean, that would have been like at least 5 years before he filmed Game Night, so I suppose it makes sense. And they made him purposely look kind of frumpy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it was a wild experience. And I still don't really fully understand everything that happened in it. They didn't they would actively not kill humans, but I don't know why. I don't think I really ever understood the motivation of the aliens.
Oh, so like in universe, it's not just like they didn't want to show like American soldiers getting gunned down. It's like in universe, the aliens didn't go for the kill.
Oh no, they killed American soldiers. Yeah, they totally did. Okay. But they didn't kill any of the clearly veterans who worked on this movie. Like those people were perfectly safe. So like when they all got on the battleship towards the end of it, and the battleship is like, I'm like, nothing's gonna happen. They can't kill all these veterans. That would be real bad PR for the United States Navy, and this is clearly just propaganda. So there's your Battleship minute. They also never said you sunk my battleship. I think the closest they came was like, you can't sink my battleship or something like that, but that was just stupid and didn't really work.
Absolute fucking fraud. Oh my god. How dare they?
Well, all right, that was 5 minutes about Battleship. That we still have a lot to talk about with it, Chapter 2. So let's start talking about.
I still got Metal Wolf Chaos on the brain. Would you have enjoyed it, Chapter 2, if at one point Pennywise had looked through the grate of the sewer and said, "What do you stand for, Georgie? Decide here and now."
Guess you're not even crab battle jack.
That had nothing to do with anything, but I these are the real questions here. Yeah, we do have a lot to talk about, though.
Yeah, we really do. Like, I was gonna make a joke about how there's not really much to say with it, but there's a lot to say.
Well, I mean, I feel like there's a lot, but also I feel like you could Control-C, Control-V our episode on the first one, and it's gonna be pretty fucking similar, give or take a Battleship review.
Yeah, which is appropriate because Chapter 2 is Control-C, Control-V of the first one.
Oh, it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, no, I don't think I hated this. I was gonna say I don't think I hated this movie as much as I disliked the first one.
That is sort of surprising to me.
But I kind of have to think about that for a second, because I think what it boils down to is I have like a recency effect, and that like I think the ending of this one I actually didn't dislike. So like I have the idea of like, oh, walking out of the movie being like, that wasn't terrible. But like the more like the everything else in it, I told Jackson I almost walked out after the first like 3 scenes. I was just livid with it. But then it turns into the second act, and the second act just goes on for fucking ever. It's occasionally hilarious, but not intentionally. If you've seen the trailer and you watch Pennywise lick a funhouse mirror, It is just as funny in the movie as it is in the trailer. I don't know why they would have anyone do that ever. And it gets better that scene gets better from there. So yeah, I mean that's basically my review. Is it gets better as it goes on, but it never really gets good.
So what in my opinion on this one's pretty similar to the first. I didn't dislike it as much as Sean, but I found it very frustrating. Both these movies are very frustrating, and I think the source material is very frustrating too, because there's a reason that it is.
Is it the ending? Is it the ending that's frustrating? Do you get what we're saying?
Do you like when Stephen King came on to say it to himself in case it wasn't clear already?
Yeah, that is not a spoiler. They make a joke about the ending with like how like the ending of it was not well liked within the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then we'll do so to remind you about every 20.
Yeah. And so let's start with the book. To review, I have not read the entire book of It. I still go back and forth on whether or not I should, because there's a reason that it's kind of a pop culture touchstone. That is, it's like a canon work of horror literature at this point, and there's a reason for that. Like very like foundational, very still pretty like when taken as a whole, not each of these movies individually, but when taken as a whole, still a pretty unique premise and execution of having it weave back and forth through like, 30 odd years of all these characters' lives and being like a grand, like epic horror about the terrors of growing up in a small town and really playing with a lot of those like Spielbergian sort of like childhood like Bedford Falls, Frank Capra 50s childhood stuff, and taking that nostalgia and twisting it to say, well, actually, like growing up in these kind of towns is fucking traumatizing. It ruins you for life because America is a nightmare. And so that's all really solid groundwork. Now, like I said, I didn't finish the book, not just because it's very long, but structurally it's very repetitive. And I'm going to hold off on describing why until a little later, because that's a very relevant criticism for both of these movies.
Control-C, Control-V, baby!
Yep. And so, and not just Control-C, Control-V, the fact that we're seeing it all a second time, like, exacerbates a lot of the problems. And so then you have these two movies. And I think that by splitting them up, you lose a lot of what's unique about the structure while still keeping all of the same problems that it has. Because you have a movie just about the kids, which without the reflection of like the adult section and like contrasting how the characters are, as you sort of mentioned last time, it just ends up feeling like, something that we've seen a lot before. And it makes sense because like it was never meant to be its own sort of story. And then come It Chapter 2. Well, not a ton really happens in the adult section either. It's mostly like reflection and, weaving these experiences with like Derry and their childhood and stuff. So not much happens here. So what we have is that over the course of these two movies, we have like 6 hours, which should be enough to adapt like all the major story beats of the book, even if the book really is like really fucking long. I mean, think about like a season of Game of Thrones is like 10 hours, and those books are probably of comparable length. I don't have numbers on me, but certainly like the first one at least.
Damn it, Jackson, this is the research I need you to do before we start recording.
I'm a failure once again. I just keep bringing us down.
The fact that you don't have page numbers, like page length, like memorized, especially on books that, strictly speaking, will change page number length depending on what edition you're reading.
That's true. And I guess to bring this back around to like how I felt about the movie is that at the beginning, like I sort of was reminded of why I found this story interesting and what about it spoke to me. And then after a while, not too long, once it becomes clear what the movie is actually going to do. It takes all that like potentially interesting character work, takes all those like seeds that have kind of been planted, and just throws them in the bin so we can have Pennywise ask what we stand for to decide here and now.
And lick mirrors. Don't lick mirrors. That's how you get
mirrors.
hand, foot, mouth. All right, it's not a good thing to do.
So yeah, overall, a very frustrating experience, especially the second time around. I was a lot kinder to the first one, but I think the fact that the conclusion is so weak, like, retroactively removes some of the goodwill I had for that one, even.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm gonna ignore theme and like idea and motif for a minute here, and just like talk about what it's like to watch as just a standalone movie. And if you're looking for a spooky Halloween time movie, go watch Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It does basically everything that this movie is doing, but better. The like horror is actually effective and not just the most predictable jump scares ever put on film. It works just about better in every possible way. Like, this movie barely feels like it earns an R rating, honestly. Like,
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
with the exception of some fucks, it's
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. But no, you're totally right, and I think I'd second that, like, if you want some spookiness, if Scary Stories is still playing, it's definitely the better movie. I mean, as far as just like a general recommendation, I know you had another like broad point you wanted to get to, but just while we're talking about this, like, I struggle a little bit. I didn't. Like, again, overall, my main emotion with the movie was frustration. However, I know that the first movie was really popular, and so if you really liked that one, I mean, you'll probably like this, because it's basically the same, and a lot of the stuff that was good about the first one, like the cast and some of the, like, some of the dialogue and like all that shit, you know, that's still there. But like, if you had even a like meh feeling on the first one, I don't think I would bother.
I mean, especially because like the Control-C, Control-V just continues to be apt, because like I get like just base misogyny and homophobia and whatnot, and like especially when you're setting it in like the 80s and whatnot. But like it's returned in a big way, in ways that are just not pleasant to watch on screen, especially because it doesn't really go in service of much of anything come the end. The homophobia does. The homophobia kind of plays into some things, but the misogyny doesn't really do much, to be perfectly honest. It just kind of sits there as a bad thing that happened.
Yes. I think especially with the misogyny, this is where, like, again, some of the frustration and that, like, already, you know, infamous sewer gangbang. This is 80s Stephen King we're talking about. Like, it's not gonna be like have the best track record on portrayal of women just by the nature of the source material.
Well, no, you get it. Her dad abused her, so she's gonna have daddy issues and go hang out with other men who treat her like her dad did.
So, but the thing that
spoilers, I guess, I don't care. I'm fucking livid about that scene, and I don't care if I just spoiled it for somebody. It's in the first 3 minutes. It fucking sucks. It blows so much ass and never comes back in any meaningful way.
No, and that is where I will at least give Stephen King a little bit of credit in that, you know, weird sewer gangbang, sure, that's there, but at least in the book, because you get so much of everyone's perspective, at least Bev is a fully fleshed out character. Now, is it great that, like, she has the task of like being the girl and representing all of like the problems of being a girl in a shitty small town like this. No, it's not. But as far as a theme, that idea I think is compelling in that I think, especially with the way that we talk about like small American towns and media, and this is one of the things that I really appreciate about Stephen King in general, is that there's a lot of like nostalgia for sort of like the simpler like rural folk. There's a lot of sort of papering over a lot of what living in a shitty small town is actually like, and I say that as someone who has plenty of experience with them. And so what I appreciate about the book and these movies in theory is that this is the focal point. This isn't just like set dressing of the setting. Like, for all intents and purposes, like Pennywise as a villain isn't supposed to be just a scary clown. He is like the evil of the town itself. Like the book makes this very clear, and that like Pennywise is just like a form that it's taken on through like it's kind of like fucking Persona, and that it changes depending on what kind of gets put into it, and the clowns all throughout like the 50s and stuff is a symbol of like childhood whimsy and the fact that he feeds on children, and like that all jives and makes sense. But really the town itself is the villain, and so. Like in the book, that same scene at the beginning of the gay couple getting brutalized, in the book, like that serves a very specific purpose as a contrast to like happy Steven Spielberg small American town. Like, oh no, like there, like it's not just that there is a scary clown about. Like, the scary clown is a manifestation of all this other fucking horrible shit that's happening. And the movie, especially with Bev, but to a lesser extent, this homophobia issue, which I guess to the movie's credit, the one thing I say that I can't even say that it does it well, because as an adaptation, everything is so underdeveloped. But the fact that it does try to like with the setting upgrade from like the 50s and the 80s to the 80s and the 2010s, it does try to update some of those themes, like again, this sort of terrorizing of gay people is going to be seen as much more of like a serious issue worth like talking about than it would have been in the 80s, back at the height of the Reagan AIDS like fear mongering. And so it tries, but the fact that the movie is so fucking underdeveloped means that you get a 3-hour movie and maybe like 40 minutes of that is like, if I'm being generous, is like meaningful character work, and the rest is all spoopy clown set pieces.
And also the first 3 scenes are someone who a gay man getting brutalized and murdered, essentially. Like, he gets murdered by Pennywise, but the intent is clearly to murder this gay man by other people, and then something in between, and then Bev in an abusive relationship. It does not set a good opening tone. Like, I get that, it works in juxtaposition and everything like that, but like, it's a pretty shitty opening tone.
Yeah, and because it just comes out of the gate with sort of the expectation that it'll make sense later, and then it really doesn't. And I think that's another problem of like splitting and trying to make this, at least to a certain extent, its own standalone movie. I mean, we haven't really touched on that much, but it's weird how much these movies try to stand alone. And that's sort of the first thing that you start with. And I can't remember how the book opens exactly, but I'm pretty sure that like it started with a chapter from like each of the characters like kind of dealing with their own trauma, or maybe a chapter from when they were kids or something. Point being, the structure here, by smoothing it down so much, big old fucking mess, removes a lot of the complexities, a lot of the, sort of tensions you would get by having a proper juxtaposition, and you just make it all, this really intense, like, assault on the senses at the beginning, followed by weightless clown shit.
And, like, it's one of those things, too, where, like, I feel like the fact that it's 2 scenes pretty quickly, one after the other, are just, like, really disgusting scenes to watch. And, like, the brutalization was upsetting, but it's upsetting in a way that I'm like, okay, this is a horror movie. This is setting tone. And, like, I get it. But, like, Bev's abusive relationship is just, like, continuing to set that tone, and also, like, to set up the idea of, like, echoes and, like, how, nothing has really changed. But, like, it's so shitty as just, I'm not gonna break down too much about it, but, like, I mean, like, there's the idea of, like, oh, okay, why would she end up in this place again? There's, like, the cycle of abusive relationships. I'm not equipped to talk about this. Like, that's really what this boils down to. But, like, there's a lot to unpack with this scene, and the movie does absolutely nothing with it. So.
No, and especially because, and this is, again, I never finished the book, so I'm assuming the book follows a similar trajectory. Again, this would have been coked out 80s Stephen King. But it also doesn't help that it seems like its only actual purpose is to continue, like, the love triangle and set her up to be, like, rescued by not Bill, and what's the other guy's name? Chunk, like, from the Goonies.
It is Bill and Ben.
Bill, Ben, and Bev. Stephen fucking King. Have you ever heard that you don't name your main characters, like, with the same letter? George R.R. Martin has an excuse because he's writing a whole fucking universe, but you don't. You named them Bill, Bev, and Ben, and they're all extremely similar sounding. Fuck you. Anyway, that's my pet peeve.
Well, yeah, no, I completely get it. I basically just ignored that and, like, hope that I could recognize their faces.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like, there totally is an element of, like, if this actually had, like, echoes and was juxtaposed with the earlier scenes, it might mean something. But as it was just a frustrating opening to a movie that just made me, like, upset as a person. Which I mean, look, say what you will, but, like, part of a job as someone who's criticizing movies is to be like, this is a personal experience of how I felt about it. So it might work for somebody else. For me, it fucking sucked, and I hated it. Do you want to talk spoilers?
I was going to say, we haven't even gotten to spoilers yet.
I was going to say, do we want to dive into spoilers? This is going to be an episode.
I mean, I think we got all the heavy shit out of the way this time, at least, so.
Hopefully.
Hopefully it'll work. Because most of my quibbles from here on out are, like, fucking, like, craft related, so.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk spoilers, but before we do, next week, we're going to be watching The Dark Knight, I believe.
We sure are. Jumping the gun a little bit on Joker. I mean, the reviews and the discourse has already started, but the movie itself won't be out for a little while. We had a gap in the schedule at Astra. It wasn't coming out when we thought it was, so we're like, hey, this is... we did one of Sean's favorite movies and we had a gap. Now we'll do one of mine. And since it's semi-relevant, I think this is the perfect opportunity. So
we're going to be doing Batman. So get ready for that next week. For now, though, what the fuck do we want to talk about with spoilers? Where do we even want to start this discussion?
All right. So I want to, since I kind of gave the general overview of alluding to the fact there were structural problems, I want to dive more into detail about how this movie sort of functions on a moment-to-moment basis, and why the middle portion in particular is such a clusterfuck.
I mean, I can save you all the time in the world. Control-C, Control-V.
Control-C, Control-V. But the devil's in the details, and I think that this isn't just a problem of the adaptation. This is a problem you maybe could solve through adaptation, but this is definitely a problem with the source material. So the reason that I never finished the book is that I got extremely tired of how repetitive it was. Even though there were some interesting characters, some interesting ideas, some interesting themes, some memorable sequences and moments, I got so tired of sad adult does a sad thing, remembers when they were a sad child, had a sad time, then Pennywise shows up and does something spooky. And
especially when half of those sad child things are things that we've already seen.
And this is a problem the movie exacerbates, because that's exactly the structure that it takes, despite having all the breathing room in the world, and yet still only like the length of a feature film to like address the adult portion of the story. And I think the worst thing is that as soon as you see the first scene where the gang like splits up to go like
look for clues,
search for clues, look for totems, and you have you have Mike, who, much like the last movie where he didn't really have a character, was only in there for 2 scenes, he still doesn't have a character here. But his role is to basically be the wizard, like Gandalf, like giving everyone exposition about like, you know, whatever fucking ritual they're gonna do because he's a crazy person who stuck around in Derry.
The ritual of Chud.
The ritual of Chud. So, and again, even there, like, you know, nice missed opportunity of the contrast of how the experience of like getting away from a small town and like having that linger in your, you know, mind, and the people who, you know, couldn't or wouldn't escape for one reason or another. Something that I do think the book goes into, but obviously Mike, you know, couldn't be a real character. He needed to be a wizard. So
who goes on fucking like ayahuasca trips and shit.
He sure does, and witnesses like the birth of the universe. And fuck. So point being, he's our Gandalf. He tells the Fellowship to disband and return when they have their like secret childhood memory totems, and they collected the tutorial one from Stan, who is dead because he couldn't handle it, and he killed himself.
Before you dive into it, as a quick aside, I did not really understand that the fucking inhaler and the coin were the totems. I had assumed that those were just things that were going to get us to the totem and not the actual totem.
Yeah, it was a little strange, especially so side note, was it really fucking weird the way that they handled Eddie's inhaler? Like the fact they were like, "Hey pussy, like you don't need your inhaler, like it shows your weakness." It's like, what the fuck, dude? If he has asthma, yeah, that's like a medical device. What are you talking about?
To be perfectly honest, I left to go to the bathroom during Eddie's scene. I was like, I know exactly what's gonna happen here. What the fuck am I gonna miss? And I came back right in time for zombie person to throw up on his face. His music plays in the background, inexplicably. Like they play like the under 6 seconds that you can play on YouTube to not get royalty strike. And like, I'm like, okay, so clearly they're trying to work around royalties. I don't think they are. I think there's different rules for movies, but it was the weirdest 6 seconds and was remarkably unfunny.
Yeah, so there's that bullshit, and then like, so they go and disband, and like when they started this, before the scenes themselves had started, because I was still interested. Like I liked the overall vibe, like of like the dinner scene, for example, of like, you know, old friends like reuniting and kind of catching up. Like,
oh god, the fucking monsters in the fortune cookies though were so lame.
They were pretty lame, yeah. It says a lot, because I saw this with my aunt, and she had turned to me, she's like, "Oh, how are you doing during that fortune cookie scene?" Because she knows I have a thing about eyes.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel anything about that fucking eyeball monster.
The fucking baby head thing, I laughed at. I cackled aloud. This movie.
Yeah. Lots of the CGI.
It wasn't even the CGI. It was just the design was dumb.
I mean, I think it's both. The CGI is not terrible, but the designs are goofy, and the CGI isn't great either.
Like, they didn't push any boundaries on it, I think is the thing. Like, it looked about, like, if you close your eyes and imagine, like, basically a furless rat with a baby face. Congratulations, you've just imagined what this fucking thing looks like.
Right.
They don't push any boundaries whatsoever. And so, like, you never feel anything to it. Like, the eye was just an eye with tentacles on it. Oh, "Oh no, I've never seen that before," said no one. I will say,
But
though,
yeah.
the kid's head at the end, when it turned into, like, the spider thing, and, like, the tentacles came out of his eyes, that was effective.
Yeah, I mean, like,
It did
the
look
movie...
like the spider head thing that Jim Sterling rails against all the time, but other than that, it was effective.
Wait, what? What Jim Sterling thing?
Jim Sterling has this, there's a Unity asset called, like, Spiderhead or something,
Oh. Oh, no.
and it looked a lot like that, and I kind of cackled at it.
Brilliant. I mean, yeah, the movie isn't completely bereft of, like, imagery.
It's pretty bereft of imagery.
It has its moments, but mostly it's lame CGI ghouls. And so...
Oh, they did do, as a quick aside, I'm sorry, I'm just going to keep cutting you off here. You're never going to fucking finish your point here. They did do, speaking of just kind of imagery, they did do kind of a clever thing where when, Bill.
Bill!
God,
James McAvoy?
Yeah, James McAvoy returns to the house. In the initial shot, when he was a child, they pull in on a normal angle, and the house is on a Dutch angle. In this one, they pull in on a Dutch angle, the house is in a straight angle. It's just a little bit of clever mirroring, and like kind of shows how their opinion of the house has changed that I appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few, like, when the movie wasn't being so in your face, I thought there were some okay things. But the movie's so in your face most of the time that it gets fucking lost and swept in the shuffle. So when these scenes started of them, like, going off on their vision quests or whatever, I was curious, like, okay, like, let's see where this is going. You know, we're gonna get some maybe, like, character development. Nope. All the flashback scenes that we see, because, you know, the premise is sort of interesting too in kind of a meta way, and that, like, because their memories are sort of altered, they don't remember things correctly, which I think is a important, like, theme of the book that they just sort of state over and over again here without actually representing it in any meaningful way, is that, like, this idea that their memories are not quite right, and that, like, they had this strong feeling of unity at the end of the first one, which maybe, you know, wasn't so great. And, like, with the exception of Richie, like, with everyone else, it's just shit that we already knew about their characters. And so we don't get any interesting character beats, which means that every single scene, it's an excuse for they go to an old place, remember a time Pennywise spooked them as a kid, then Pennywise spooks them as an adult, like clockwork. And this takes up the bulk of the movie. Extremely fucking tiresome, extremely fucking boring, extremely fucking frustrating, and like a squandering of a decent premise for, like, a character-driven horror story.
And, like, as a book, I could see how this could work, like, thematically and ideologically. Like, if you have the chapter of him as a kid and the chapter of the character as an adult, it would make sense to show, like, the growth and how things, as much as things change, they stay the same. But the movie does not have the tact to do that. It just plays it off, like, almost completely straight.
Yeah, it's all like, you know, pomp and circumstance. It's all about the clown, because the clown's a meme. We need those meme bucks. That's how the first one got popular, I guess.
And then the clown looks the mirror. I'm not gonna give that up. All right, look, I don't remember this fucking dancing clown, but the dancing clown's got fucking nothing on the clown on mirror.
I can't remember it. I'm sorry. I can't believe you don't remember the dancing clown, because one of the things that pissed me off the most in this movie was at one point Richie, a character who wouldn't have even seen it, like, sort of makes a Marvel quip about Pennywise.
Is that when they have the camera still on him and the world shifts around him?
I thought it was at the dinner.
No, I'm talking in the first movie.
Oh,
like the camera's tracked on him. So, like, as he moves side to side, it moves with him, so it looks like he's stable, and the world is shifting.
I remember him just, like, standing in place, basically doing the Flargon style from Celery Man.
Okay, I am thinking of the right thing, but yeah, as soon as he said Flargon style, I'm like, yep, that's it.
No, so like, Richie wasn't even around to see that, because that was when, you know, Bev had her stupid kidnapping in the first one.
Oh God, I have so many thoughts about that.
And
still.
even, I mean, I gotta say, it takes a lot to be worse on gender than a book from the 80s by a cracked out writer who didn't really care about what he was doing.
She wakes up after going through like near sexual assault with her father by being kissed. That is not okay.
But he's the cute little fat boy, so it's okay, Sean. Shush.
Fuck you. I'm livid about that.
Anyway. Oh man, there's so many diversions here because it's such a bloated mess of a movie.
It really form and function, baby. And not only that, we're just making callbacks to the first. Control C, Control V.
It's sort of like poetry, they rhyme. So,
except this isn't like poetry. This is like they just wrote the same line on repeat.
I mean, I've read some poetry that would match that description. But yeah. So I mean, that's basically point number one, is that on a moment to moment, this didn't even work very well in the book, I don't think. Like, it's why I gave up on it. In the movie, where they don't have any character building and it's all just memes, it's much more fucking tiresome. And so that's just on a moment to moment basis. Like, I think the other like big like structural craft writing problem is the fact that they chose to split it into two movies, which I think like must have seemed like a good idea on paper, but in practice what ends up happening is that you have the first movie, about the kids, and problem number one is just that what makes it unique is the interaction of those two elements. So by splitting them up, you're already getting rid of like the story's perhaps greatest asset. But not only that, because the story is so famous now, you end up with the effect that you were left with last time of like, seen it before, like whatever, a bunch of kids fight a thing in a town. And on top of that, the thing that they had to do in the first one that makes it worse in hindsight is that in order to make it like a complete movie, they had to theoretically like wrap up their character arcs, which means that it's the most noticeable with Bill, because Bill in the first movie, he's got his little thing about accepting his brother's death, except the problem is that the whole point of the fucking story is that the characters haven't accepted and moved on with the horrible shit that happened to them when they were kids. Like, that's the entire idea. But because it's a Hollywood movie, we need a convenient, like, third act closer of Bill accepting that Georgie's gone. So then, not that it's unrealistic that, like, with a loss like that, especially when there's such like survivor's guilt involved, that like they wouldn't be wrestling with that when they were still adults. But just from a narrative standpoint, the fact that he just goes through the same fucking character arc again, incredibly tiresome. It's like basically the same scene when he finally puts Georgie in the water, and he learns the same lesson, except now he's old.
And also comes pretty much out of nowhere.
Yes.
Like, he was still feeling that guilt, like, 10 minutes prior.
No, yeah, especially because, like, and this is another thing that, like, obviously Stephen King gotta have a writer character, but at least, in the novel, like...
And himself.
And himself. Stephen King makes a cameo, which is fine, whatever.
It wasn't bad, yeah, I didn't hate it.
It wasn't like super obnoxious or anything. So like, but that's one of the, like, that's a lot more developed in the book, where he like has his problems with his wife, who seems to like she's gonna play a role in this. Like, they have a little argument at the beginning. Seems like there's gonna be more about that.
God, the wife disappears. At one point, he kisses Bev. I'm like, hey, wasn't there a wife somewhere in here?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's a pretty big question mark. She doesn't even come back at the end when like they're reading Stanley's letter.
Oh, yeah, and also like at one point he says something like, "Why would she be the character I want you to be?" or something like that. And like I felt like that was gonna be a theme, and it's not. It's nothing.
It really isn't. And so like that's what happens. And this is the other main problem with the movies, is like that's what happens when you take characters who like they can fit into these little stock archetypes, But when you have like, hundreds of pages to give them interiority, like they're obviously going to be more complex. But the movie doesn't have time for that, or it does have time for that. It just uses it on fucking memes. So that's what we end up getting, is that Bill is just the leader with the guilt complex. Bev is the girl. Ben is the fat kid who's not fat anymore. Richie's the wise mouth. Eddie's the hypochondriac. Like, you really can summarize everyone in like a word or a phrase. Which means
the last kid is dead.
And the last kid is dead. Yeah. So Mike is a wizard.
I'm gonna take over for a second here. Just because we kind of rolling the ball back a little bit to something that I'm a little bit more familiar with, or not familiar with. Yeah. Just kind of rolling the ball back to something that I kind of struggled with the movie, is the fact that they were showing flashbacks and also like things happening in the actual movie, like things that are happening in that timeline, kind of started to blur for me, specifically around the character of Bowers. Bowers is the bully in the first one, and his everything about Bowers in this movie confused the ever-living fuck out of me. And like part of it too is I didn't remember that much about it chapter 1, but part of it too is that like I think his is the first scene that we see a flashback of. And so like we see the scene from the first movie where he's coming home, he gets blamed for the death of his father as the balloon flies away. My assumption was that like this is like more echoes, like we've already seen the echoes, so like this is happening again and it's a new Bowers. And so like we then cut to Bowers in the insane asylum, like 27 years older, and I had assumed that this was like Bowers' partner, because I believe he had a partner in the first movie, or like a crony.
They both got off though. That was the corpse giving him the knife to slash his way out.
Well, that's the whole thing too, is the corpse giving him the knife I thought was Bowers, because that looked more like Bowers than 27-year-older Bowers.
27-year-old Bowers looked like Peter Pettigrew.
Yes. Yeah, so like especially because then that guy was driving around Bowers' car. So I didn't understand what the fuck was happening, who Bowers was, until like somebody says like, "Oh, that is Bowers." Because I'm like, I had assumed that Bowers had died, and so like Pennywise brought back Bowers to be a stooge again to go rescue his henchmen, so that the henchmen could like run around and kill things. But like no, they don't really touch on who this dead guy is in the car, and like what the fuck, what happens to him? They just kind of disappear. Bowers just kind of straight up disappears. Bowers makes no goddamn sense in this movie, even a little bit, especially in the context of a movie that tries to kind of stand alone by reminding you of what happened in the first one. Like, I think if it hadn't, I would have understood that was Bowers. Bowers was the bully from the first one. But with that scene being one of, if not amongst the first flashback scenes, it confused the ever-living fuck out of me.
And so that's another weird thing, in that I think they put themselves in a corner again by splitting it into two movies, and that I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, I don't remember the first one that well, but doesn't Bowers like because Mike's only notable trait in the first movie is that he, like, aside from he has two notable traits. He has to deal with racism, and he has the sheep gun that he uses to butcher, like, help at the fucking slaughterhouse. I'm pretty sure Bowers got shot with that and fell down a well. And so maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm misremembering how that sequence of events went. But still, like, Bowers seemed pretty fucking dead in the first one, regardless. Like, I thought he was dead.
We got that's what that scene picking up is. It's him getting expunged from that to go see his dad already dead. I remember that happening.
Well, right, but, like, the fact they needed to include that flashback, because we thought Bowers was dead in the first one. Like, you see what I mean? Like, how this is a problem. Like, we killed Bowers in the first one to make our bully subplot come full circle. Except, oh shit, in the book, Bowers is like the key master for Pennywise, so he's got to come back somehow. So we got to put in this weirdly placed flashback.
Yeah, I have no fucking clue what was up with it. It was just kind of bad.
just kind of bad. So speaking of Bowers, and speaking of just kind of bad, speaking of Control C, Control V, second verse same as the first. I'm gonna make the same criticism of this movie that I made of the first one, and that Disney's wretched claws are all over the film industry. Every single time a character fucking does a Joss Whedon snarky quip, I feel myself like rage at the heavens against Bob Iger, for running Marvel or whatever. I don't know if this is from the book. Like I said, I didn't get this far. But Bowers, I'm pretty sure he takes one of them out in the book. But he goes, and I thought Eddie was going to die there, like when he goes and stabs Eddie, which, I mean, I guess maybe they're trying to do the Pet Cemetery thing where, like, it's different, but we don't know, and there's no one around to tell us this time that we don't know. So, but, like, he stabs Eddie, like, in the cheek. And Eddie, like, pulls the dagger out of his mouth and, like, stabs him in the chest, and he still survives. Like, they take more punishment than a fucking JoJo character.
I did like that scene, though, of him going behind the curtain. Like,
yeah.
I kind of dug that. Like, that was kind of clever and some interesting character development. But that's completely undone immediately afterwards by him just going back to being terrified of everything.
Right, yeah. It doesn't even stick it that way. Like, ooh, I'm so scared, guys. I'm going to poop my pants. Like, ooh. He has to do it like 3 times before he finally gets it right. So, like, that happens, and then Eddie's fine. And I don't know, like, it feels like...
And Bowers skitters away, never to be seen again.
Well, no, that he comes back to get clubbed in the head, and then, like, never
Wait,
mentioned.
does he?
Yeah, Richie does it. Like, he's gonna stab Mike, and then Richie shows up.
Oh, right. I forgot all about that scene.
It's because it's so unimportant in the grand scheme of things. They're like, well, that's that subplot resolved. Let's go clown hunting, I guess.
It really was. Like, the him skittering off was at least memorable, because, like, the pulling it out and stabbing him through the curtain, like, when you can't see, was an interesting setup to the scene. Him just getting clocked over the head was so fucking predictable.
And so it's yeah, I mean, it's just super strange how, like, the characters are constantly quipping. Like, it's supposed to be a horror movie, but, they have Richie say, like, Pennywise, like, he's that stupid fucking dancing clown. Remember how dumb that scene was in the first one where Pennywise dances? You all made memes of that. We're in on the joke, aren't we? And, like, that just keeps happening. Like, even it's one thing to have the characters, like, bro out, like, at the like dinner party or whatever. It's another thing entirely to have them do it while they're getting chased by a giant spider clown pulling knives out of themselves like a fucking JoJo protagonist.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. As a quick aside, just because I do want to talk about this, mostly because it was bizarre for, I'm sure, almost everyone in the movie theater, but for me, it kind of tickled something in the back of my head. What did you think of the Here's Johnny reference?
Cringe. Fucking cringy. Ugh.
It plays into the Dark Tower.
Does it really?
It really does. If you take this as a part, like, it and The Shining are confirmed to be part of, like, the grander Stephen King Dark Tower universe in one way or another. And so for it to know about The Shining makes sense within the Dark Tower universe. I don't know if literally anyone else is going to recognize that. I know the Dark Tower series isn't unpopular, but I also know it's not necessarily the most popular series from Stephen King. It's a thing that I saw and went, oh, I get why that's there. It's not gonna play for anyone else. It's gonna look weird and out of place. And I might be overanalyzing it. It's totally possible. But
I mean, what you're saying makes sense because of, how the Stephen Kingiverse works. I don't know, having just seen the Dr. Sleep preview, I couldn't help but think, like, I don't know if I'm willing to give them that much credit, the filmmakers.
Oh, no, I mean, I might not be myself, like, the more I talk about it. But like the fact that it existed in that form was felt, at least to me as someone who is mostly familiar with Stephen King through the Dark Tower novels, like something it was doing there.
Well, you hear that, It Chapter 2 filmmakers, death of the author. You might have done something clever completely on accident. Good job.
It's possible. Okay, I have one thing I kind of want to say in closing. Do you have anything else before I kind of talk about this?
I hit all my main points, and that the main frustrations with this movie are, great, interesting ideas on paper, made dull through not even like the worst execution I've ever seen, just clumsy bloats, and that's sad.
Well, I'm gonna actually tie into that a little bit, honestly, because about midway through the movie, I kind of had a realization. It felt like I was watching Goosebumps. And I mean that in the way of like the story more played second fiddle to the scares. Goosebumps is not necessarily super narratively driven. It's more of a vessel to give the kiddies the spooks. And this very much felt like that. Like every scene, just like it felt like it was more in service of setting up for some new thing to happen. But what if twist at the end type of thing going on. And like, it's an R-rated movie. Like the fact that I could predict everything that's coming is insane. Like this, honest to God, felt like it could have taken place with Jack Black narrating it. Especially the fucking lumberjack scene. Like that felt that might have been the most Goosebumps scene of the entire movie.
Yeah, Paul Bunyan had some strong Goosebumps energy now that you mention it.
But I mean, like everyone else's did too, in a lot of ways. So like it really felt like lots of little Goosebump vignettes tied together into something that didn't make a lot of sense. Because like I was thinking, like as I said, Goosebumps isn't really character or story driven. It's more just narratives to get you to the scare, and that's what this is. Like it never really, those moments never really had any big thematic cohesion to them. Like they clearly had ideas underlying it, but they never really presented themselves super cohesively. And so instead, just felt like setting up for Pennywise to jump out and go, I'm a clown.
What are you stealing for, Georgie?
Exactly. And like it's just all about the imagery rather than anything. And when you expect me to sit here for 5-6 fucking hours to care, you gotta give me something to care about. And I don't care about the clown, especially when your scares are stupid and bad.
Decide, you and now.
I care more about Goosebumps. I'm gonna say that Goosebumps does a better job of storytelling because it's designed for kids, and like they last 25 minutes, and then you're done.
You also get choose your own adventure Goosebumps that puts you into the action.
You also get Goosebumps that sometimes if you open the book, it goes, ah!
Wait, did they really have that?
There were a couple of them that would shriek when you would open them.
Oh my God, I would have hated that as a kid. I'm glad I didn't have any. I would hate that now. Oh my God.
No, they're fucking great. I like Goosebumps were great. Goosebumps were fucking wonderful. But yeah, that's kind of my final hot take is that like this movie is just Goosebumps, but for adults, but also still for kids because it never actually feels that scary for adults. Like
I can't even disagree. Like I can see like a lot of my students really liked the first one when I was teaching, and that makes sense that like they'd be like 18 and this would be like a competently made and well enough movie for them to go and like meme at the clown. But it is still R-rated, so like the people who get the most out of it can't really see it, I don't think. So
yeah, I mean like it's we've been getting more and more into horror movies on the podcast, which I think is a fascinating development. But like there's just so much better horror out there that like this is really like a baby's first R-rated horror, and I feel like I probably said that on the last one too.
The reason I said Control C, Control V is that we called it the Marvel movie of horror.
Yes. No, I remember that for sure, but I couldn't remember if I described it as like baby's first horror as well.
That I cannot remember either.
Because like that's really what I'm kind of left feeling. Like it is like the evolution between Goosebumps and like actual horror, but I don't know. It's also like I assume this is like actually the connection between Goosebumps and then like fucking Annabelle creation or something, as opposed to good horror. But maybe I'm just a snob. I'm probably just a snob.
Sean, you got to get down to the level of the good people. Just appreciate the clown, man. It's all about the clown here. We like the clown.
Do you know that I was positive I fucking hated horror movies, and honestly, horror movies might be amongst my favorite genre now.
I always thought it was weird that you weren't into horror as much. Like, I always thought that was weird.
Like, I was always positive that they were all just shitty jump scares and stuff. And then, like, I realized that there was actual good horror out there. And I'm like, this is the greatest shit in the world. Like, this fucking rules. It's creepy, it's unnerving, it raises questions of the soul, the self. There's good shit in horror. It's just not it.
Ayo! I've not been Sean McKinda, that's him.
Yeah, it is. I'm Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Hopples_Skippy. And you can find my writing over at 25yearslatersite.com. I'm talking about Preacher still. There's like 3 episodes left when this goes live. I hope to God it pulls off some sort of satisfying ending, but I'm not holding my breath. Hell yeah. I'm also not Jackson Keller.
I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me over at twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller, where we play Smash Bros. And Mario Maker and stuff, and I'll be the only person in the world cracking up about Pennywise doing Metal Wolf Chaos dialogue, and I'm gonna run that into the fucking ground, so don't drop by. Don't do it. Spare yourself.
If you want to keep up to date with what's going on with the podcast, the best way to do is to follow us at BADH_cast on Twitter. It lets you know if we're like changing movies midweek because something came up, anything like that happens, and also when episodes go live, including bonus episodes. And speaking of bonus episodes, if you want to get access to those, as well as to our Patreon exclusive Discord, I guess gave away the plot. You go to patreon.com/BADHcast at only $1 a month. That's fucking nothing. You can get access to our Patreon Discord where you can yell at us directly about how we're dumbs. $5 a month, you get the access to our bonus episodes, which have all been absolute fucking bangers. And at $10 a month, you get to request bonus episodes. But, a little quick caveat before I let Jackson give our special thanks. We're actually looking for a bonus episode this month. We're going to open up to a little bit of a wider audience just because we've gone through a lot of our $10 patrons already. If anybody has a shorter suggestion, we're a little bit tight on time, so like an anime of 10 episodes or less is doable. Some sort of like shorter video game or a movie, hit us up. If it's like longer than 10 hours, we're not going to be able to do it
this time. Keep it in the bank for next time.
Absolutely.
And for all our lovely $10 patrons, Julia, Travis, Mom, Aunt Summer, y'all are great. Thanks for keeping the lights on. Here it is, the shout out. What do you stand for?
You've made that joke 3 times. I don't know that it's been funny to anyone ever.
It's been funny to me, and that's why I keep doing it. So I am a bold visionary making art for myself and myself alone. Honestly,
you know what? If it makes you happy, I'm not here to stop you. I'm going to mock you for it, but I'm not going to stop you for it.
Sean, that's what I stand for.
You know who else we stand for? Lords of the Highway, for letting us use their song Suicide Alternate Take as our theme song. It's off their album High Octane, Low Expectations. Go check them out. They're on Spotify, all the other places you can get music. I mean, I can't think of any other places you can get music. iTunes, I assume. So go check them out. Listen to them. Give them your clicks. Give them your money. Support them. They're wonderful. Also, thanks to 25 Years Later site for the endorsement, for hosting us, all that good stuff. They're a great group of people who are way more talented than I am. So if you look at my shit and you're like, that's fine, but I want better, go read other people's stuff on there. There's some really, really talented people on there. So go support them as well. as we said, next week we're going to be talking about Batman The Dark Knight, one of Jackson's favorites. Let's see how it holds up. Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go